All right, let's go to Kapitel 12, chapter 12.1, the future. So we have die Vergangenheit. Here's the guy from the past. Die Vergangenheit means the past. We have several different verb tenses we learned to talk about the past. Then we have die Gegenwart, which means the present. Präsens means the present as in verb tenses, a grammatical word, but then die Gegenwart is the word for the present, like the real present. And then die Zukunft means the future. It's the word for the future in general. And of course, the grammatical tense is called futur, but die Zukunft is the regular word for the future. And this is what people look like in the future, you see, with a different hat. So let's talk about the future tense. In der Zukunft habe ich meinen Traumjob. So we had already the idea that the present tense can actually indicate the near future or the future with some sort of other time expression, right? So we say, in the future, in der Zukunft habe ich meinen Traumjob. So in the future, I have, and it's just the present tense, but since it says in the future, it really implies I will have. So in the future, I'll have my dream job. So we can use the present tense to indicate the future. It's fine. We've been doing that for a while. But there is a future tense, and it is used sometimes. So it's important to know and to recognize because the future also exists, and it's made with werden, a form of werden in the present tense, plus the past participle at the end of the sentence. So werden here is the equivalent of the English will helping verb, and then whatever other verb you want to use with will plus the other verb. So in this sentence we have, in der Zukunft werde ich meinen Traumjob haben. In the future I will have my dream job. So will, and then this have corresponds to the have at the end of the sentence. So just like with modal verbs where we had the helping verb here in the normal verb position, and then the infinitive at the end of the sentence. Same idea with the word order. So in the future, in English, we might say something like, I shall return, or I won't do it. Won't is will not, right? And then I am going to study law, going to, or I will be back. So we have several different ways to express this in English, and depending on the context, you might want to choose one of these. And then the way we form it in German is with the helping auxiliary verb werden plus the infinitive of the main verb. So we have ich werde meinen Traumberuf finden, which is I will find my dream profession. Der Berufsberater wird mir dabei vielleicht helfen, which is the career counselor will maybe help me with that. So will help, wird helfen, he will help. So it's important to be able to recognize all of the forms of werden because it's conjugated irregularly in every tense. So this is the present tense of werden, maybe remember from before. So ich werde, du wirst, er, sie, es wird, wir werden, ihr werdet, sie werden, sie werden. So the thing about werden is that it means a couple of different things. You remember it as to become. It means to become. But if you add another infinitive at the end of the sentence, it doesn't mean to become anymore. It means future tense. It means will. So we'll see a few examples of how to distinguish that. The future tense is constructed with a conjugated werden in the present tense plus an infinitive at the end of the clause. So, ich werde meinen Traumjob haben. I will have my dream job. So we've got werden in the present tense conjugated for ich werde, right? And then whoever it is going to have the right conjugation in the present. And then the infinitive at the end of the sentence. Haben, have, haben. I have some more right here. Bernie Sanders wird Präsident sein. So Bernie Sanders will be president. So wird is then he, she, it, right? Er, sie, es wird. He, she, it will. In this case, it's will. It would mean becomes. He becomes. But in this case, because we see this infinitive at the end of the sentence, it actually translates to will because it's going to form a future tense. Will be, so wird means will, and then sein is to be. So of course that will, those two verbs together make the future. And then Wir werden den Klimawandel verhindern. We will prevent climate change. So we, and we conjugate werden in the present for wir, which is werden, wir werden den Klimawandel, there's our direct object, and then our other verb is verhindern, which means prevent. We will climate change prevent, as in we will prevent climate change. And then here's another example of German using an article where English wouldn't. Yeah. Okay, so werden in the present, of course, goes ich werde, du wirst, er, sie, es wird, wir werden, ihr werdet, sie werden. And then to contrast, we have wollen in the present. Do you remember wollen from the modal verbs? This is a very big trap. So ich will comes from wollen, which means to want to. So ich will means I want to, but then ich werde means I will, as long as you add another infinitive verb, then it means I will, right? So ich will means I want to, not I will. Du willst, er, sie, es will, wir wollen, ihr wollt, sie wollen, sie wollen. This is all to want. Wollen, to want. So we look at werden versus wollen. Ich will nach Hause gehen means I want to go home. It is my will to go home. I desire to go home. I want to go home. Ich will nach Hause gehen. Versus ich werde nach Hause gehen. Now we have a conjugated werden plus an infinitive at the end, which means I will go home. It is the future tense. I will go home. Wir wollen in die Schweiz fahren means we want to drive to Switzerland. Wir wollen. And then wir werden in die Schweiz fahren means we will drive to Switzerland. So we will. This one isn't as tricky because wollen doesn't look exactly like will. It's just its own verb. It means to want, right? Yeah, werden is, of course, going to turn into will in English because this is the future. Wir werden in die Schweiz fahren. Yeah. So we can always make sure that we remember how to conjugate werden. Ich werde, du wirst, er, sie, es wird, wir werden, ihr werdet, sie werden. And then wollen, good to drill these much times till you can't mess them up. Ich will, du willst, er, sie, es will, wir wollen, ihr wollt, sie wollen. Okay, so the other thing about werden I mentioned earlier is that on its own, as a main verb, it means to become. So you can have something like ich werde Ärztin, which means I am becoming a doctor, or maybe I become a doctor. Ich werde Ärztin. So it's present tense, and there's only one verb. I become a doctor. So werden is totally alone. There's no other verbs happening. So when werden is alone, no other verb in the clause, then it means to become. Werden plus infinitive at the end means future tense. So ich werde nach Hause gehen, I will go home. So you see, once you can start out the sentence thinking like, okay, I become something, and then you get to the end of the sentence, you're like, oh, it doesn't mean become at all. It's a future tense. So that's why it's important to get to the end before you make any verb decisions. And then what's interesting is that, of course, you can combine the two if you want to say will become. You want the future and you want to say become, you would use them both. So you would say, ich werde Ärztin werden, which means I will become a doctor. So this first will is the helping verb to make the future. This first werde means will. This werde, ich werde, means future. We're going to go into the future. And then the one at the end, the main verb, is actually to become. So I will, a doctor, become. So you can actually put both of them together if you happen to want to say I will become. So here we have the future tense. Werden plus infinitive. So we have ich werde im Herbst studieren. Maybe you want to add whatever you're going to study, right? Ich werde im Herbst Englisch studieren. So werde studieren. Conjugated werden in the present tense plus the infinitive at the end. Morgen wird sie reisen. So tomorrow she will travel. Tomorrow will she travel? It's a second position after this adverb. Zunächst werden wir something lesen. So, zunächst is kind of a false friend. It's a little bit of a false cognate because I think I went for the first 2-3 years of learning German thinking that zunächst meant next, because we have das nächste. We just had that recently. Das nächste means the next thing. It would be like das nächste, der nächste Tag, the next day. Nächste means next. But then zunächst, which sounds like, oh, it's probably the same thing. I mean, could it really be that different? Zunächst, nächste, right? It doesn't mean next at all. It means first. So it's quite a different meaning. So yeah, zunächst, that can trap you as well. So first off, or initially, I usually translate zunächst as initially, depending on the context, but zunächst, initially, or first off. So first, initially, we will read whatever. So werden lesen. Sie werden nach 2 Jahren verkaufen und dann kaufen. Yeah. So werden verkaufen und werden kaufen. Yeah. So if you're gonna have you can have two main verbs, and you don't have to repeat werden. You can just do this. Your first main verb, and then whatever else you need to do, and then your second main verb. So the way to translate is, of course, ask yourself whether werden stands alone and means become, or is a helping verb, auxiliary helping verb. And if it's a helping verb, auxiliary, it means will, as in make the future out of it. So you have to make sure that you're not dealing with any other verbs before you decide it means become. And then beware the false cognates. German will means English wants, and German wird means English will. That's just one conjugation of werden. It could be different things, but wird is just the one they did. And then we have, wollen looks like the future tense, but will arbeiten means he wants to work, and wird arbeiten means he will work. So yeah, the present tense of werden, infinitive, is future tense. And then they have a little passage here, so you can see some instances of werden and will being used together. So I translated it for you. Ein Lehrer macht Pläne. A teacher is making plans. Nach jeder Prüfung werden meine Schüler unruhig. So you see, what do we got in this sentence? We got a prepositional phrase, nach jeder Prüfung, after every test. And then werden, we have a verb. I wonder if it's going to be the main verb and mean become, or if it's going to be the future. We will have to see. And then we have meine Schüler. That sounds like it's the subject because we had a verb in the second position. And then what happens is if you have your verb in the second position and you haven't done your subject yet, the subject has to come next. So we have our subject. Also, you can see meine Schüler is in the plural. And you can tell because of that E right there. And then this is conjugated to match the plural. It's like they, and then the en is ending in one for they, whatever the verb is. So after every test, my students, and then we have unruhig, which means restless or uneasy. So after all that, you realize that, okay, werden is the only verb. We didn't get another infinitive at the end. There's no other verb. So werden stands alone. So we decide it means become or get is another translation. So after every test, my students become uneasy or get restless. Und dieses Jahr ist die Prüfung schwerer geworden. So this is, we have ist, dieses Jahr ist die Prüfung, and then a past participle. So ist or hat, so as form of sein or haben, plus past participle, you remember, is the perfect, the conversational past tense. So that's what we have here is a past tense, and then geworden is our past participle. And so this is actually a helping verb, ist. It doesn't really count. And what's happening is that geworden comes from werden, and it's being used as the main verb. So since it's the main verb, it means to become. So, and this year the test has become more difficult. Und dieses Jahr ist die Prüfung schwerer geworden. This year the test has become more difficult. Also werden die Schüler wahrscheinlich sehr unruhig werden. I don't know if also came up at any point yet, but if we haven't talked about also, yeah, that's a huge false cognate. That is like a big trap. So also looks like it means also. It really, but it's not also. It means therefore or so. It's just a little connector words. So I said so here. So yeah, also means it's just therefore, thus, so. If you want to say also in English, too or also, that would be auch, A-U-C-H, auch. So auch means also, and also means so or therefore. Yeah. Also werden die Schüler wahrscheinlich sehr unruhig werden. So now we've got two instances of werden, and I had that example just a moment ago. So what's happening is werden is the main verb at the end, but werden is also the helping verb. So whenever that happens, it's basically going to be will and become. So the students will probably become very uneasy. So will the students probably very uneasy become. Ich will ein Experiment machen. Ich will ein Experiment machen. So when you come to this, it's going to be very tempting to say, I will do an experiment, but it really means I want to do an experiment, because you can mix in these things. He's done several, he just did a future tense, right? The last sentence was in the future, but it's just the way that desires work is they reference things in the future. So you can have these stories where they go back and forth, and then because you're already thinking about the future, it's so easy to translate this as I will instead of I want to. Ich will ein Experiment machen. I want to do an experiment. Nach der Prüfung werde ich einen Assistenten im Zimmer haben. So just stop there for a moment. After the test, and we see werde, and we want to know, is that going to be a main verb, or is it going to be a helping verb in order to make the future? So then you say ich, okay, that's the subject. Einen Assistenten, that's going to be the direct object. You can see it being in the accusative there. And then im Zimmer, that's purposeful phrase. And then you get to haben. You're like, okay, haben, that's an infinitive. It's going to come together with werde to make the future. So after the test, I will have an assistant in the room. After the test, I will have an assistant in the room. Okay. Und now we got a new independent clause. Wir, okay, we got a new subject. And then werden. Now we got to go through the same thing again and ask ourselves, is there going to be another verb or not? Wir werden die Schüler in zwei Gruppen teilen. Oh, teilen is an infinitive verb, and it means to divide. So, and we will, and then to continue translating, you got to grab your other verb and put it next to werden. So, and we will divide the students into two groups. And then, and then we got the und, and we're going to just add on a little bit more, one more phrase. Ein Spiel spielen. So we just got another direct object and another verb. So this werden is going to apply to both of those. Wir werden teilen, we will divide, and then also wir werden ein Spiel spielen, but we don't have to repeat it. It's just going to work for both of them. So wir werden ein Spiel spielen is then we will play a game. So I said we will divide the students into two groups and play a game. Just like in English, you don't have to say we will divide the students into two groups and we will play a game, or even without the we will divide the students into two groups and will play a game. You don't have to repeat the will. You can. It's still implied. So then we have modals in the future. So with a modal verb, it's a little bit more complicated. We have werden as the helping verb, and then a double infinitive in the final position of the clause. So let's look at these. Unsere Freunde werden uns bei der Arbeit helfen können. So our friends, unsere Freunde. And then werden, there's our future tense. Will, our friends will, werden. And then we're going to do everything else before we get to our last verbs. uns bei der Arbeit. Us with our work, or us at our work, depending. And then at the end, we have two infinitives. And so what we need to do is, we notice that the modal verb comes at the very end, and then the main verb comes second to last. So we grab these two verbs and put them back over next to werden, and in English the order needs to be will be able to help. Will be able to help. So it's like werden, then you go all the way to the end to get to be able to, and then you go second to last to help. And then you do everything else that needs to be said in the sentence. Our friends will be able to help us with our work. Unsere Freunde werden uns bei der Arbeit helfen können. Will be able to help. Er wird bald für seine Prüfungen lernen müssen. He will soon have to study for his exams. So, wird, he will, so far. Wird bald, that's also lines up so far. But then, suddenly, we are saying for his exams. He will soon, for his exams, have to. So we say wird, and then you take lernen müssen, and then you take both of those verbs and put them next to wird, and then you get he will have to study for. In English, you could have soon in several spots. You could say he will have to study for his exams soon. He will have to study soon for his exams. It goes in several different places in English. But in German, you're just going to get verb in the second position, and then time, manner, place of whatever else is happening here, and then main verb, second to last, helping verb at the very end. Yeah. So then we have some future time expressions. We can imply the future, of course, by using the present tense plus an adverb referencing future time, just to remind you of that. So we can look at some examples of present tense verbs that use an adverb to indicate future. Die nächste Führung beginnt in 20 Minuten. The next tour, yeah, so that's the thing, is that the verb is beginnt, so begins in the present tense. But as soon as you say in 20 Minuten, then it's very clear when it is. It's in 20 minutes. So in German, it's still the present tense, but if you want to, you can translate it as will. But think about in English, the next tour begins in 20 minutes. I think that sounds fine. The next tour begins in 20 minutes. I don't know if I've been doing German I don't know if I've been doing German for too long where that's not supposed to sound right in English, but now it does. But I think it does sound fine. The next tour begins in 20 minutes. Yeah, so I think either is fine. And then die Reisegruppe geht heute Nachmittag in die Ausstellung. The tour group is going to go to the exhibit this afternoon. Yeah, so geht, we've been talking about this ever since we started doing present tense verbs. Is going to go is one of the possible translations of geht. It just goes, but really, depending on the context, it could be is going to go. All of those are fine, yeah. And then studiert im Herbst implies he's going to study in the fall. And then wird im Herbst studieren indicates a definite intention. He will study in the fall, he shall. Yeah, so if you do use the werden infinitive, if you use like the real future tense, it implies something a little more intentional. And you can also like say to someone else, like, du wirst das machen, you will do that. And it sounds like a command. Du wirst das machen, you will do that. And so it's used sometimes to like imply sort of a command type situation. And so that's why this is like stronger. So wird im Herbst studieren implies a stronger sort of intent than studiert im Herbst. Studiert im Herbst is fine. It seems pretty neutral. But wird im Herbst studieren is like he will study in the fall, despite everything. He better, you know, yeah. But you can use the werden plus infinitive in normal speech. It's fine. But English speakers tend to use the future more often than German speakers, so it is one of those things that might tip off someone that you're not a native speaker if you overuse the future when they would just use the present. So now we have some exercises to practice the future. Translate the following sentences. Pay close attention to werden, since it can mean different things. So sometimes it's a main verb, sometimes it is part of the future. And then we have translate some predictions about the year 2030, etc. Okay, so I hope you had fun with the future so far. Have fun with the exercises und wir sehen uns im nächsten Video. Tschüss, bis bald.